Hit record. Hello, and welcome to the February meeting of Citizens Climate Lobby with the Boston and Boston Metro West chapters. Today, we're going to hear a presentation from Professor Marta Vicarelli, about an assistant professor of economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And I'll let you take it away.
Okay, can I share my slides?
Of course.
Great.
I think Zoom should allow you to do that.
Yeah. Are you able to see the, I don't know what you're able to see though. Oh,
I'm just seeing a black screen that says that you've started screen.
Yeah, it has stolen the slides. It never happened before. 1 second. This is very interesting. Okay, now I understand what happened. All right. Okay, so here we go. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm gonna open the slide in slideshow.
Awesome.
So thank you very much for inviting me. My name, as it has been mentioned already, is Marta Vicarelli. I'm an assistant professor at UMass. And this project was a project that involved a lot of people. We had a large research team for the report. And for this slideshow, I got the support also of my teaching assistant and research assistants, Yuya, Maddy, and Aryan, who supported, in fact, the effort of the entire team in preparing descriptive statistics. The report is a report about the status of coastal resilience in Massachusetts. However, we also have data about inland municipalities, and I will show you a little bit. The way this presentation is organized is a little bit like, I'm Italian, so I apologize the metaphor, but it's a little bit like a wine tasting experience. So I'll give you a little bit of different parts of the report. And if that's interesting to you, you can buy the full bottle. It's free, actually. And you can see the report with all the information that we have included there. The report includes descriptive statistics, and it includes also something else that is not in the slideshow, which is quotes and contributions, qualitative contributions. So municipal leaders sharing their point of view and their experience. The survey was anonymous, so also the contributions are anonymous. And I will tell you a little bit in a second. So these are the universities that participated in this effort. Virtually all UMass campuses, except the medical school, participated in the design and dissemination of the survey and analysis of the results. This is actually the team that collaborated on the project. As you can see, there are professors from scholars and professors from very different backgrounds, from political science to geoscience and environmental conservation and economics. This work would have not been possible without the support of the Massachusetts Municipal Association. They were instrumental in disseminating the survey. They sent a survey to members of the Massachusetts Municipal Association via email. It's an online survey. And the members of the association include mayors, town managers, but also town officials, for example, sustainability managers, energy managers, etc. We also received support in the dissemination of the survey from different planning agencies, and almost all planning agencies in Massachusetts disseminated this survey. And that was also very helpful because they also completed a portion of the survey that was for planning agencies to have an aggregate perspective about the challenges of their planning region. So the purpose of this study, as I said, is to have an outlook on coastal resilience or climate resilience in general. We try to assess or gather information about climate change hazards and impacts that are already experienced. These are hazards and impacts that are self-reported by the respondents, resilience strategies that municipalities are already developing, that have adopted, but also the resilience strategies that they would like to adopt in the future. And then we ask questions about barriers. And this is also the reason why it was important to have the survey anonymous, to have really transparency about what are the challenges that they're facing, essentially. And then we asked them questions about data needs. I should preface all this saying that this was one of the first research efforts of the Northeast Center for Coastal Resilience. It is a new center that we are creating within the UMass system. All campuses are involved. And the purpose is to better understand with this study is also to better understand what type of research effort is needed locally in order to support resilience efforts. So as I said, the survey distribution was online via the MMA, and respondents were municipal officials, everything anonymous. Now we're going to dive a little bit into the responses. We got responses from 111 municipalities, and you see the municipalities here in color, and they're colored by county. I have another image that gives you the same distribution, but by planning region, and that was important for the planning regions to know in terms of who was able to respond. We love that we have a large diversity of responses from coastal areas to inland areas. And this is how we divided municipalities between coastal and inland in terms of identification. So in the report, you will find the graphics that describe results for inland municipalities and results for coastal municipalities, and this is how we identify them. And we essentially used the categorization. You see the footnote of the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management. So key findings. Let me start from the impacts. Oops, too fast. The key finding really, which we expected, but let's state it, 99% of respondents have already observed impacts from climate change in their municipalities. And what we wanted to know was the level of severity perceived. And as you can see, let me just move Zoom because it's in front of my figure, so I cannot see the percentages. As you can see, just chromatically, you can immediately see that the darker colors are toward extreme, meaning it's more likely that coastal municipalities report extreme to significant impacts. Essentially, there seems to be a gradient of severity going from inland to coastal, an increasing gradient. And this you can see in this map, and darker color means extreme impacts experience. And you can see that the more you move towards the coast, the more you see severe impacts. We also had a municipality that indicated that they didn't experience any impact, but that was the anomaly in the sample. We investigated different types of impacts. We wanted to know about environmental impacts, so impacts on local ecosystems. We wanted to know about infrastructural impacts and economic impacts. Please remember that we are interviewing basically municipal officials, so their vision of economics is the economy of the municipality. I'm not going to go through all the details, but I want to explain how to read this type of graphs. And we have a lot of this information and this type of graphs in the report. So these are the hazard experienced. The dark color here represents strongly affected. On the left-hand side, you have a list of hazards, and the percentage indicate the percentage of municipalities that reported experiencing being strongly affected by the corresponding hazard. In yellow here, you have not affected, but we expect it's going to become a problem in the future. And we really wanted to understand what is the perception of hazards and the perception or perspective in terms of concerns as well. Among the top hazard experience, you have severe storms, storm surges, sea level rise. This is for coastal municipalities. In the report, you're going to see this also for inland municipalities. So as I said, I'm going to be very superficial in the analysis to give you a sense of the breadth of the report. But I'm happy to go back and visualize and describe better some graphics if you're interested. as I mentioned, we did an analysis also for inland municipalities, and we also provide graphics that allow to see a comparison between inland and coastal municipalities. Coastal here are dark blue and inland municipalities are light green. And we see this predicted hazards in coastal versus inland municipalities. And as you can see, the predictions are sometimes different in terms of what they expect are going to become issues. In terms of the impacts, what is interesting is that we have performed the same type of prediction analysis, and very often inland municipalities are more likely to predict impacts only because coastal municipalities are already experiencing them. So you're likely to find the light green bars longer for inland municipalities in terms of impacts because the coastal have already experienced them. So environmental impacts, just to give you a sense, as I said, the dark means that they are strongly affected. And among the most prominent impacts from an environmental standpoint, we have wastewater management concerns, water habitat degradation, introduction of invasive species, and then for coastal municipalities, harmful algal blooms and high bacteria events, water resource degradation. So something that I would like to put on this impressionistic map that I'm creating for you is that water management is emerging as an area of great concern in relation to climate change. And so water infrastructure is an area that is receiving a lot of attention from municipalities. And then there are a number of items that are related to public health. So air quality concern and heat-related illness and increasing vector-borne diseases. As I said before, yellow means future or expected concern in the future. And you see that you will see in subsequent slides as well, that there is some sort of complementarity between the blue and the yellow. So if they are not affected yet, they expect that it's going to become a problem in the future. Infrastructural impacts. So we found this is particularly important because infrastructure is the connective tissue of economics, right? Of the economy. So did I skip something? Yeah. So this is infrastructural impacts, and you see that a large percentage of municipalities are more than 70% are experiencing strongly to mild impacts to in terms of loss of beaches and properties due to shoreline retreat, and then damage to dams and or seawalls. And this is damage to resilience infrastructure, to gray infrastructure that is there to protect them. So it's already infrastructure that requires high maintenance costs or infrastructure that is already obsolete, essentially. Damage to private properties. And you will see that damage to private properties is connected also to the economic impacts. And we will see in the economic impact slide that there are impacts related to insurance, access to insurance in coastal areas, and out-migration of residents from coastal areas, and concerns in inland municipalities about in-migration of residents. And these migratory movements, potential future and already sort of observed migratory movements are also a major concern of planning regions, planning agencies. Then we see other impacts that we expected. So disconnected roads, power outages, damage to port and coastal transport infrastructure. This is very strong in certain municipalities, but is becoming a very strong concern in our coastal municipalities, and it can have major implications from an economic standpoint, but also in terms of social welfare, because some of these ports and some of this infrastructure represents the supply hub for distribution of goods, including food, for example, in Chelsea. And damages to this type of infrastructure may affect well-being in the entire region. So there are general aggregated statistics here, but then there are also specific cases that we plan to investigate in the Center for Coastal Resilience to better understand how we can help to avoid compromising these infrastructural centers. And as you can see, we see emergence again about damage to stormwater drainage systems, damage to waste water supply system. And something that is emerging, and you're going to see it in the next slide, both in inland and coastal municipalities, is damage to historic sites. And this is important in Massachusetts because of the cultural value of the sites and also the economic value of the sites and potential implications for tourism. So these are predicted impacts. As you can see, among the top predicted impacts, we have damage to water supply systems and damage to historic sites. And they are at the top really for both coastal and inland municipalities. And then there is a variety of impacts for which you don't have exactly the same percentages, but because the damage to municipal public structure and spaces is already more prominent in coastal municipalities than in inland. And so it's obvious that it's going to be longer, the perspective, the percentage is going to be bigger in terms of perspectives in inland municipalities. Then moving forward, we have the economic impacts. I'm going to go a little faster now that you're familiar with the structure of these graphics. And you see that at the top, you have additional costs associated to disaster response. This has been a very important issue, not only in the statistics, but also in the contributions that we received from respondents. They are very concerned about what this means, what climate change means for the municipal budget. And then decrease in housing availability, difficulty obtaining home and building insurance. And then you see that this housing element is present in multiple answers: in migration of residents, out migration of residents, and then consequently possible also increase in unemployment, which is related also to demographic transitions. And at the bottom here, you see decrease in tax revenue, which is a small percentage, but is a great concern because if there is out migration, obviously there is going to be an impact in the fiscal health of the municipalities. This slide is again showing you in parallel. I'd be happy to share these slides at the end, but the report is richer. So you're probably going to be better off just to see the report. And now I just want to summarize a little bit about the impacts here. There is something that we noticed when we mapped the impacts, and it's that inland municipalities are likely to indicate that they're already impacted by negative outcomes that seem to be especially coastal. So for example, we have several inland municipalities that indicated that they have perceived negative effects of impacts on the blue economy, and which means that there is a strong interconnected network of economic interest in Massachusetts between the coast and inland municipalities. So if the fishing industry is affected on the coast, there would be municipalities inland that might be affected too, perhaps because there are distribution hubs of products that go to New York or other parts of the country. Then, as I mentioned, these migratory movements are something that we observed in terms of out-migration from coastal areas and immigration to inland areas. We have observed in terms of concerns, current and future concerns. There is something about equity. I don't know how much time I have, but I would like to mention something, which is that in terms of planning, municipalities are very concerned about getting the right data to take action. So we actually asked what are the most vulnerable groups in their municipality, and the majority of respondents indicated, you see almost all municipalities indicated elderly residents. And then you see we have people with disabilities, low-income residents, children, veterans, and then we have minorities, immigrants, and other. Massachusetts is not a very diverse state, so it's possible that this reflects also the socioeconomic and demographic makeup of the state. But this is an area that we plan to study at the center. We want to understand what is the level of vulnerability of minorities in relation to climate change. And we asked who has already invested resources in increasing resilience of groups that have been identified as vulnerable. And this is the distribution of responses. So yes, dark blue, and then no, but we plan to is lighter blue. No is this larger band, and then you have not applicable because they don't have this concern. It's the lighter color. What I would like to emphasize is the fact that in order to take action in terms of resilience planning, we need data, right? When we ask municipalities if they have data to monitor impacts of climate extremes on vulnerable groups, and if this data is separated by race and ethnicity, this is what we got in terms of answer. We asked in relation to employment statistics, food security, health statistics, and housing. And essentially, you see in dark blue, we have municipalities that have this data. In light green, municipalities that do not have this data. And in pink, it's municipalities that do have the data, but that and they do have the data separated by race and ethnicity, which basically means that only 5 to 7% of municipalities have data related to minorities. And this is another area where we hope to provide some support. And this is an area where we are developing research at the Northeast Center for Coastal Resilience. In the short, the acronym is NCCR. I think I'm taking a lot of your time, but just to let you know, we also ask questions about strategies, and we ask questions about planning strategies, and then green infrastructural strategies. So these are gray or engineered strategies, and there is a list of strategies that is currently adopted. The pink means strategies that they would like to adopt in the future. And then we ask questions about nature-based solution strategies. Just a clarification for those of you who might not know. So we say gray infrastructure for engineering infrastructure and green infrastructure for strategies that rely on ecosystems to provide the protective services. And there is actually a large number of municipalities in Massachusetts that have already started adopting nature-based solution strategies, including land conservation, nature-based solutions to prevent erosion, so dune grasses and forest conservation, etc. But there is still interest. As you can see from the pink side, there is still interest in expanding this type of strategies. One of the advantages of these strategies is that they have zero maintenance cost over time, and so an endless stream of benefits in the future. The problem is that you're going to get benefits when the ecosystemic infrastructure, so when the vegetation is at maturity. So it may take a little longer for these strategies to really provide protective services at full capacity, and hybrid strategies, gray initially and then green after, might be an optimal strategy for several areas. And so this is another area that we plan to study at the center, and we discuss in the report. And then barriers, this is a very interesting part of the report, at least personally, and it seems also for our readers, which is, what are the issues? One of the biggest issues is lack of staffing capacity. Essentially, municipalities feel understaffed to handle climate change. And this feeling understaffed is not only in terms of number of people working for the municipality, but also the type of expertise that they have that might not be sufficient to elaborate complex grants, see lack of grant writing capacity, or to be able to fully understand the implications of the data for their community. We investigated further the type of challenges that they encountered, and I can tell you that another challenge for them is trying to understand where they can get grants or resources to tackle these problems. The grant structure can be very challenging for small municipalities because sometimes they don't have staffing capacity, as we said, but sometimes they also really don't have the expertise to develop a grant proposal. And something that we learned, and I'm summarizing it here for you, is that the most municipalities, in order to get funds to develop resilience strategies, need to apply for a grant. But if they don't have the resources, they would like to rely on mentors for this grant. So to rely on other municipalities or to create some sort of coordination networks regionally to be able to learn about how to approach these problems. And they lack coordination. They would like to have more coordination with other municipalities or regional coordination hubs to help solve problems that are trans-municipal problems that might affect multiple municipalities at a time. Something else that they mention is lack of regulatory authority to support the enforcement of the strategies, and insufficient metrics to monitor progress. But this is an ongoing problem that has been reported in multiple points in the survey. Essentially, they don't know how to measure success. They don't know how to set benchmarks and determine this is where we start, this is what we should achieve. Measuring success and determining what success is very difficult, but obviously this is an unprecedented phenomenon for us as human beings, and it's very difficult to determine how fast we should move and how much we should do. But it can become really daunting task at the very local level. Well, there is not even high resolution data. An additional consideration is that this lack of cooperation and coordination has been pointed out not only at the regional level, but also sometimes at the municipal level. So different people writing from different departments indicate that they would like to be able to collaborate more closely with other members of the municipal staff to solve problems in a concerted way, while they feel like different departments and divisions of the municipalities address climate change in different ways or do not take into consideration resilience planning in a holistic way within the municipality, which increases costs locally and sometimes fragments responses. These are just what I just told you, but in terms of data, this is where you find the need for regional cooperation and more need for municipal cooperation. And what you can see here is that you see the two colors is town and cities. You see that this issue seem to be persistent across municipalities independently from size. And then you have, yes, for some problems, you're going to have differences between town and cities. But for staffing also, let me just go back very quickly. Staffing capacity, it's quite astonishing that even cities indicate that they're understaffed. So 85% of cities and almost 92% of towns say that they are understaffed in relation to climate change. So we're basically at the end. The last thing I wanted to say that when we ask them about their data needs, they all indicate they would like to have more data about economic valuation and particularly local data. And so we hope that the center is going to be able to do that. We applied for a large grant and we are hoping that NSF will approve it. And this is going to be one of the aspects that we're going to invest our resources in, which is creating a database of local data in relation to economic impacts. So I'm sorry that it was longer than expected, but I hope I gave you a general tour of the report and that was hopefully interesting. And I don't know if there is time for questions, but if there is not, I'd be happy to answer questions remotely via email or. Gary,
Gary, could you unmute?
That was really great. And I think we can let all our volunteers know the link to the report itself. If you want to throw that in the chat before you leave, otherwise I can.
Yes, sure. I will put it in the chat.
And I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. If anybody has a question, raise your hand. John?
Hello.
Unmute, John.
We can't hear you. Sorry.
I apologize, I was muted. What role do you think, for lack of a better term, direct measurement might play in gathering at least some of the physical data using, the kinds of things that, video and those kinds of things to say, assess structure and assess, maximum tides and a bunch of things like that. What role, if any, do you think those kinds of things might play?
So I don't know exactly, because it might depend on the type of measure that we want. So or what we want to observe, right? There are a lot of different strategies to observe different things. So I don't know if I have an answer that is a general answer, but so for example, we are trying to be very creative in terms of data collection. And so there are economists in our team that would like to collect data about the value of nature-based solutions, so of this ecosystemic infrastructure, by collecting data, the so-called sensible data from mobile phones, to see access to these resources beyond the protective services. So there are very creative ways to collect data. We thought a lot about the economic side, because there is already abundant data related to the geoscience side. So we have sea level rise data, we have very good records. NOAA is our source of endless information, NOAA, NASA. But the economic side is challenging, because the data, usually when you read reports, is always aggregated by region. It's never provided at the very granular level of the municipality, but municipalities need to make decisions about their territory. And very often when they develop grant proposals for resilience strategies, they have to be designed by the municipality. And so they have to essentially make decisions with very limited data. It's an asymmetric type of decision-making, and can be very inefficient, because they might overshoot action or do too little. And the other problem about this lack of data is that it may be difficult to gather local support from the local population, so from the community. When you see the report, I assume that you're going to be interested in reading this report. And when you see the report, even if you just go through the pages and you look at the quotes, you will see that it's difficult to convince people to take action. So if you have a small community and it's not a community led by a mayor, but there is a select board, how do you convince local residents that they have to invest a large amount of the budget in a resilience strategy when you don't have clear data, and what you are proposing is essentially based on precautionary principle and some anecdotal evidence from your community? So making decisions can be very difficult with lack of data. So I see this is a very important question that you're asking, and I don't think I provided a good answer, but I'm trying to say that this is really a big problem and we are really trying to think about it.
Anne-Marie?
Hi, you can hear me okay, Marta? You're speaking to a group that advocates for broad community support for climate resilience. And so one of your charts said that that's one of the biggest challenges that the municipalities have, is how to mobilize people for broad community support. So as you give this presentation to groups like ours, like, what are your thoughts about the role of the local part of, there are more and more people engaged in advocacy groups around climate resilience, and what does your data tell you, and or anecdotally, or next steps for your group on engaging with groups like the one you're speaking to now?
So we try to understand that result and try to understand what the motivations might be. And in fact, not to be repetitive, but this is a group of political scientists in our team wants to do network analysis and try to better understand what happens in municipalities. So we have identified some archetypal communities in Massachusetts, and we plan to study the support networks in terms of resilience action in those municipalities to better understand the motivations, the incentives that can lead people to support resilience planning.
I mean, what I've seen is that in my municipality, it's hard to even get them to apply for a grant because they can't even have the bandwidth to coordinate if they did get the money. They have to slice the two people that they have in 16 places in order to just oversee, even if they contract it out. You know, that at the municipal level, the staff is very small in many of the Massachusetts towns.
Yeah, so this is the staffing capacity that seems to be so pervasive in Massachusetts. The community support that we saw in that result, I think based on the qualitative data that we got, is related to, it seems strange to say, but in some municipalities, there is a large contingent of residents who do not believe in climate change. It's not everywhere, it's just some areas. In those municipalities, we have discussed with different municipal officials, and it seems that it's important to detach language from climate change. And so they're gonna take action to limit the damages of extreme events or damages to, so that's something that has happened in those places. But in other places, the lack of support is not because of disbelief, but it's because the local community is not convinced that so much money should be invested now to address those issues. And I think that this goes down to data, but it's also true that sometimes there are political divides or there are priorities that go beyond data. But
yeah, well, the role of data in persuading people can be large or small, depending on the people you're persuading. Yeah, thanks.
But it doesn't happen when we don't have it, right? So we will know when we have the data, if it helps. But right now we also miss that. So it doesn't help at all, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for your talk. It's really very fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marta. Really appreciate your coming to speak with us this evening.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really grateful.
We'll continue to follow the NCCR and hopefully have you back to speak to us another time, or somebody else from the group. So thanks very much for joining us tonight.
So if I'm probably going to have to leave now, but I'm going to send a link to the report via email, and then maybe you can share it with everybody.
Yes.
Thank you. And if you have any questions, you can just Google me and I'll be happy to answer your questions via email. Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
So we just heard from Professor Vicarelli about how bad the problem of climate change is and how it's already affecting our coastal communities here in Massachusetts. And sometimes hearing those things about the magnitude of the problem can be disheartening. But I think the salve for that feeling is action. So let's take a moment here to make a small push towards a solution on that. So let's all go to cclusa.org/takeaction and write letters to President Biden and our senators about how this talk made us feel about the urgency of action on climate change.